can't hide. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Rusty Shelton of Zilker Media. Rusty, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. And by the way, if you're watching the video, you can see here I have Rusty co-authored the book with Adam Whitty here, The Authority Advantage, Building Thought Leadership Focused on Impact, Not Ego. So some of the past episodes, I had Michael Gerber of the E-Myth. He was on, and then there's I don't know if your Rusty's head's covering it right now, but you could see the one thing. There you go. The one thing. Actually, he has helped the one thing with their promotion and other things. We'll talk about that. And I had Jade Pappison on the podcast talking about the one thing, which is a great book. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, one of my favorite books. And that was a great interview, that and many more. Check them out on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. And at Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream 100 relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution, production. Rusty, we call ourselves kind of the magic elves that run in the background to make it look easy for the host and to get the content out and everything else, making sure it happens. You know, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I've found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire on this planet and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. And a big shout out. Thank you. Lisa Tenner is also a past guest. Check that out. She raves about Rusty and the help that you provided her. And Adam Whitty is a past guest, of course, who is your co-author here of Forbes Books and Advantage Media. And amazing, just shared some amazing insights. And Dr. Harbir Singh also is instructive. We are meant to meet at some point with all these connections. So thanks to all of you. And Rusty Shelton's founder and chairman of Zilker Media. And they handle PR, digital marketing, platform development for some of the world's most respected brands and thought leaders. What I'm most excited about too is we will talk about some of the services they provide. And I think their quiz marketing, what they're doing with quiz marketing is amazing. So we're going to break that down a little bit. And he's going to show what they do and how they do it. Because I've not seen anyone really doing that, what they're doing with the quiz marketing. He's also senior marketing strategist at Forbes Books. He first spoke at Harvard on the world of PR marketing at 23, and he focuses really his career in helping leaders build thought leadership. He's written 3 books. He's spoken around the world to audiences such as YPO, EO, Harvard Medical School. And again, check out the book, The Authority Advantage, that he co-authored with Adam Whitty. He's a proud member of EO Austin. So Rusty, thanks for joining me.
Jeremy, thanks for having me. I'm actually rolling off the EO Austin board this year after a 2-year stint in strategic partnership. So my wife's happy I'm about to get a little bit of time back.
A lot of time back. We're going to dig into Authority, the book, The Authority Advantage. But first, I want to just have you talk about Zilker Media and what you do.
Sure. So Zilker Media, we're an agency focused on helping clients and companies build people-driven brands. So really the focus for us with the agency is taking all of the things that we've learned on building thought leadership for authors and publishers through the years with some of the biggest books in the world. And we're now taking that and applying it to institutions, to companies, to nonprofits, who many of which are still leading with a corporate logo that people are more skeptical about than they've ever been. And so the quickest way to build trust, as we'll talk a little bit about today, is not to be positioned as a company or an operator with something to sell, but instead a mission-driven thought leader with something to teach.
And I want to dig into the quickest way to build trust, but I have to ask about the quizzes because I'm fascinated by this. And, you'll see, if you're watching the video, you can see we're on Zilker Media, and you can see the PR, brand strategy, digital marketing, quiz marketing. But I want to hit on the quiz marketing for a second and how you came up with it and what this is exactly.
Sure. So this was a light bulb that went off for us with a launch that we did for the book. You can see in the middle here, the confidence code. So this was 8-9 years ago at my previous agency, Shelton Interactive. And we were hired to go do the PR launch for that book. It was published by Harper Business. It was written by Claire Shipman and Caddy Kay. And Claire and Caddy came to us a couple months before the book came out, and they said, hey, we want to do a confidence quiz related to this book. And we want to allow people to go in, take the quiz, figure out, do they have low, medium, or high confidence? And so we said, all right, we're going to figure out a way to do this. And I'll never forget, Jeremy, when I got the attachment for the quiz. Claire and Caddy had worked with some researchers at Ohio State University. I got the attachment, I open it up, and I clicked through this thing, and it is like 50 questions long, some of the most intrusive demographic questions. Like the first version of this thing was just breaking every rule. And so I said, I called Claire up and I was like, nobody's going to take this thing. It's just way too intrusive. And she said, well, we're working on it so long with them, we can't back out now. I was like, all right, we'll see how it goes. Well, I've eaten more crow on that quiz than almost any other one that I've worked on through the years. So we've to date had almost 250,000 people take that quiz. And
Wow.
in that first year, 100,000+ people. And it was a huge light bulb for us because, Jeremy, really the key thing there is when authors or individuals go out and do a bunch of media, whether they're doing interviews or speaking, et cetera, they're reaching a lot of people, but unfortunately that softball question that gets asked by the host at the end, hey, where can our audience go for more information? Usually the answer to that is, well, hey, book's out on the market. You can go grab it on Amazon or head over and learn more about how to work with me. And again, that's like a Hail Mary pass. We might have one person out of 100 that's ready to buy that book immediately, or one person out of 1,000 that's ready to reach out to learn more. So instead, what happens when you've got a great lead magnet, in this case, a quiz, which we see perform hands down better than any other lead magnet, the answer to that question is not, hey, go buy my book. It's, hey, I'm sure a lot of members of your audience are curious how confident they are. We get that question so much. We teamed up with some researchers and created a free confidence quiz. You can go take that at theconfidencecode.com. Well, you siphon off, as you know, a much larger piece of that audience. And most importantly, you extend your interaction with that group of people. You give yourself a chance to nurture them. And so quiz marketing for listeners and viewers, if you have not tried that, at the very least, it allows you to give great free value for people that come into your website. At the best, it is hands down the most effective, elegant next step to take somebody from real estate somebody else owns and bring them back to a place where you can own the connection to them.
And you can make it fun. Like if you're looking at this, right? So I pulled up we saw the confidence code. I love your Austinite quiz, Rusty, because you make it fun here. You can see it doesn't have to be these questions, but you have these gifts like what time of day should you eat breakfast tacos, right? And so you can make it fun. It doesn't have to be just like a stale multiple choice thing. And so I love what you do with these two.
Yeah, you got to make it fun for a lot of the different versions of this. The narcissism test that you brought up there, we're almost at 500,000 people that have taken that. And this is one for your listeners. This was based on a book called Rethinking Narcissism. And the basic premise of this is there's good narcissists and there's bad narcissists. And it just depends on kind of how you channel it. And so this one, as you can imagine, Jeremy, you got a lot of like tongue in cheek Facebook.
People are probably sending it to their friends. Like, I think you should take the narcissist quiz.
Yeah. Tagging brother-in-law on Facebook, that kind of thing. So yeah, this one was a lot of fun.
There's a virality to it.
Oh, there is. And the cool thing is media love talking about free quizzes. And so when you have something like this during the interview, a lot of times the host will have taken it ahead of time. You can talk them through results. But the biggest thing, and I would encourage people to think about, Jeremy, if anybody listening to this is spending a dime on PR, on advertising, on marketing, and you don't have a great lead magnet like a quiz or like a free download, as Rise 25 has or others, you're missing an opportunity because you may be driving a lot of interest into your website, but if you don't have a way for them to extend their interaction with you and your company, other than calling you, you're missing a lot of opportunity there just to nurture those people you reach.
And then I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, Rusty, but people can go to the Authority Marketing book, right? And there you have a quiz there.
We do. So if you go to actually for the new book, theauthorityadvantagebook.com, you can go in and there's some free resources there. You can access an authority assessment, et cetera.
Yeah. Because I think I saw that you have an authority IQ or authority quiz, right?
Exactly. Yep. We've got that built out, and it's a good way for people to kind of dip their toe in the water with where they are right now. And, you can get some free resources related to the book as well.
Yeah. Well, what's cool about that though, is when you, cause I saw it and I'll try and pull it up here. I know that the URL probably goes directly here, but you can kind of see when you take the quiz, you can kind of see your thought process, right? So like when you look at this, Google page 1 search results, well, you should probably go on Google your name, and you have certain methodology on that and see where you come up. And these are things to improve on. Obviously, that's what the quiz is. So maybe you can walk through a few of these, just what your recommendations on how to improve these. I don't know, which one do you find is the lowest hanging fruit for people when increasing their authority?
I think the biggest thing, Jeremy, is just to kind of put yourself in the shoes of somebody that's been referred to you. Let's kind of walk through an online brand audit for a second. So if I've just sold my agency here in Austin and I'm looking around for referrals on a great financial advisor, you're one of 4 or 5 people that gets referred to me. First thing I'm going to do is go kick the tires, right, on that recommendation. I'm going to try to figure out, okay, is my buddy the outlier and having a great experience with you? And so online brand audit, put yourself in my shoes. Again, I've been referred to you. If I'm going to Google and popping in your name, number 1, can you be found? And if the answer to that is no, there are one of 2 reasons why, right? Either you've just kind of intentionally been a ghost online up to this point, and if so, cool, we're going to try to work you over that today. The second more common reason is you either have a name that is common enough that you share it with tons of people. So think like David Scott or Jim Smith or something like that. Or you have a really unique name that you're unlucky enough to share with, an NBA basketball player or an axe murderer from the 70s. And so part of what we want to have people think about, Jeremy, is if you can't be found right now, does it make sense for you to change your name? We tell this story in the book where we talk about David Meerman Scott, who's one of my favorite PR and marketing authors. He was kind enough to write the foreword to our book. His name's David Scott. And what he recognized really early in his career is as he was going out and speaking and getting referrals, if people were getting referred to David Scott, they were going to have to pack a lunch and go 10 pages deep on Google to find him because of the competition around that name. So his name and your listeners,
you're not going to mistake the middle name, Meerman.
Yeah. Right. So David Scott's a very crowded piece of real estate. When he adds in his middle name, Meerman, he walks across the street, right, to a piece of real estate that's empty and immediately owns search. So tactically for your listeners, do you have a name you can own? And if the answer to that is no, let's add a middle initial or a middle name, and then let's go with that full stop. In other words, that's what's on your LinkedIn profile. That's on the front cover of your book. That's how you're introduced on stage, et cetera.
How'd you decide on who to choose to write your forward? And by the way, I have his book here. I love the first 4 words. It makes you want to read more of the forward, right? He wrote, "I was fired, sacked." Like you have to read on from that. How'd you choose him for the forward?
Well, those first 4 words are taken right from the script of a really good speaker, right? Somebody that's opening up, pulling that audience away from their phones. So David Meerman Scott's always somebody that I have personally been a huge fan of through the years. He's on the board for Forbes Books, which is the publisher of the book, and Adam Whitty, who's my co-author, is the founder of that company. And so when we thought about it, Steve Forbes was kind enough to write the foreword to our previous book, Authority Marketing. And for this one, we decided we wanted to go with somebody that we felt was a great case study in doing this well, as Steve certainly is as well. But so he was awesome. He agreed to do it. He even recorded for the Audible version, his own version of the forward, which was really generous of it.
I'm going to get the Audible then, for sure.
Yeah.
The quickest way to build trust, you were mentioning.
Yeah. So the quickest way to build trust is to lead not as an operator with something to sell, but instead to be positioned as a thought leader with something to teach. So this is really the core point for me in the book, Jeremy, as Adam and I were looking at this. The previous book, Authority Marketing, I think of as more of a tactical book, right? And the challenge with that book for leaders is they saw the word marketing and they threw it over the fence to the marketing team, right? In other words, that's for them. And really this message, as you know really well, is really more of a mindset shift for leaders. And so what we were trying to do is speak to the behind the scenes servant leader, the impact-driven leader who for years has been over-delivering for their internal team, for their clients, for their partners, for their community. They're exceedingly well-regarded. They have built great trust there, but they have taken a significant backseat to the corporate brand, right? Or the institutional brand. And so the challenge that those leaders have in today's environment is they are essentially limiting the impact that they can make as a leader, because the only people that build trust with them are those that are lucky enough to come in direct contact with them. And so Gallup put out a study last summer that put on paper what a lot of us have been feeling for years, and that is trust in institutions, in businesses is at an all-time low. And so for those companies that are over-delivering behind the scenes, if they're leading with the logo or if they're marketing through the business, they're marketing to an audience that's more skeptical than they've ever been. And so part of what Adam and I wanted to do with this book is really grab that servant leader by the shoulders and say, listen, the more you continue to just be heads down behind the scenes, the more you are costing your existing team, your existing clients, your existing partners, but because you are not in a position to accelerate trust for your business. And so that's really what we're trying to do is we're not trying to pull the leader out in front of the corporate brand or out in front of the institution. It's really out alongside it. So the company's an interstate. We want as many of the right clients, talent, partners on that interstate, and the leader has to be an on-ramp back to it. And we can dive into this in more detail, Jeremy, but it's not only a mental shift for the leader to teach at scale, but it's really shifting the way they're positioned before they get in the room, because a leader today has to build trust before they get in the room.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm going to pull up something in a second, Rusty, but I was interviewing someone last week and I went to their about page and they don't have a picture of themselves. I mean, there's no pictures of themselves or anyone, and it's just it's not personal. You know what I mean? It's just exactly what you said, right? In comparison, let's go to Zilker Media for a second. You can see a bunch of people. I don't care if it's you or someone. I want to see someone's face. And it was just like one of those generic images. And it's a really successful company. And I was shocked that it didn't have that personal feel to it, you know?
Yeah.
Why do what are the big objections you get from people on this?
Well, I think the biggest objection that I get from the kind of leader we're trying to talk to, who is a servant leader, who is over-delivering, impact-driven, the biggest concern is always, I'm worried people are going to think this is an ego trip, right? I'm worried people are going to think that I'm building a hey, look at me kind of brand. And by the way, I get that. And some of your audience members, when they hear that phrase, thought leadership or personal branding, they're either grimacing in their car or their stomach's turning a little bit. And we all get the reason why. I mean, for many of us, our minds immediately go to people that are doing this the wrong way, right? People that are building ego-driven, hey, look at me kind of brands. And so to be crystal clear, when Adam and I talk about creating an authority advantage, the idea here is really to be the messenger, not the message, right? So in other words, if you have a message to get out to the world, if you are communicating that message through the business, if you're communicating that message through the logo, it's going to cost you a lot more money, take you a lot more time, and be a lot less effective than if the leader is willing to get out. And instead of being positioned as selling something, they want to be positioned as a mission-driven thought leader, right? So I think that's the biggest hump that we've got to get people over. Jeremy, what I find for a lot of those leaders is as they start going down this road, what immediately feels, okay, this is, I don't want people to think this is about me. They start to see the impact that it makes at scale. They start to get feedback from people who, it's a life that's changed, or it's somebody that's off in a different direction on the business front. So definitely hands down, ego is the biggest pushback.
I'd love to hear some real world examples so people can hear them and then learn how to implement as well. And by the way, we're looking right now at Audible. The Authority Advantage is Audible. I just bought it real time. So it's very easy, especially if you have an Audible account. So I'm looking forward to listening to it.
Thank you.
One of the people from the book that you talk about is Dr. Jamie Reynolds. Can you talk about what happened with them?
Yeah. So Dr. Jamie Reynolds heads up one of the fastest growing orthodontics practices in the Midwest. So I was up there a couple of years ago speaking at an event that he was putting on in Detroit. He did an event for all of the local dentists that are big referral partners for him. And I went up there and kind of talked about this concept of building thought leadership the right way. On the way to the venue, he dropped by, his newest practice location. And we walked in the door. It's kind of all the normal stuff that you would expect to see from a modern orthodontics practice. The thing that kind of caught my eye, Jeremy, was that there's a huge golden gong that was in there, like in the middle of the exam room. I'm like, what's the deal with this? And he said, well, like most orthodontics practices, we are built almost entirely on the back of referrals. Most practices, the way they generate referrals is, or the way they try to generate referrals is, kid gets the braces off, parents go up to pay the final bill. Front desk clerk is kind of trained to put a couple postcards up at the counter and say, hey, we're built on referrals. Do you know any other parents that are thinking about putting braces on their kids, right? Super awkward for everybody involved in that conversation. And so what they do instead is they kind of map the patient experience and said, all right, at what point are they the happiest with us? And of course, it's super easy for an orthodontist, right? It's when the braces come off. And so what they do in their practice is when the braces come off, everybody stops what they're doing. You could be mid-exam and they're going to stop what they're doing. Teenager goes up, bangs the gong, everybody cheers. And of course, the mom can't get that video on Instagram quickly enough or on Facebook quickly enough. And what they're doing, of course, when they share that video is they're waxing on about their experience with Dr. Reynolds and his team. And so what they've facilitated with that is they have empowered somebody that already knows and loves them to talk about them in a way that they're winning as they do it. That's one of my favorite things you guys do at Rise 25 with great podcasts is you empower people to share information, to engage in a way that the prospect or the client or the investor is winning as you do it. And so that's one of the big things I want to encourage people to think about is within your business, is there a gong moment? And if there's not an obvious one like Dr. Reynolds, how do we facilitate some of those gong moments with a podcast or by featuring certain people in your book? There are a lot of different ways to do that. But this for me is a light bulb for a lot of leaders who Jeremy, when I mentioned thought leadership, the response is, Rusty, I'm too busy. I don't have time for it. Well, one of your most important things as the leader of a business is building relationships on behalf of the business. And this is a great way to do that.
Is that the title of your next book, The Gong Moment? I think you have another one.
Maybe so. I could see the cover already.
I love what you talked about, mapping the patient or the client or customer experience and then finding that moment where people are the happiest and it makes it the most shareable. And how do you create that moment that is something that they can share in, it sounds like, for any company?
For sure. I mean, you think about go to any coffee shop in most cities in the US, there's probably an Instagram wall. At some point in there's a mural with branding for that coffee shop. And what they're trying to do with that Instagram wall is create something that's interesting enough that you just want to take a picture in front of it. You're excited to push it out. You go to a conference, if there's a photo backdrop with logos, there's going to be a ton of people taking pictures in front of that backdrop. You've empowered them to talk about it in the way that they're winning as they do it. At Zilker, what we do, if we've got an author that we're working with, when their book publishes, we send them a box of cookies and their cover of their book is in icing on the cookie, right? And it facilitates a great moment that they want to talk about.
They're going to take a picture of that. They're going to post it somewhere and it makes it special.
Yeah, exactly. At Forbes Books, when somebody publishes, we send them a autographed cover of their book with the team that's worked on it that has signed it. And so those kind of things work exceedingly well, Jeremy. What part of what Adam and I talk about in the book, though, when we think about a podcast or when we think about relationship driven content, the magic in inviting somebody on your podcast, or you've got a Forbes blog and you let somebody know you want to quote them in that article. Well, there's a lot going on there, right? I mean, it's the person that gets that email is thinking, oh, I didn't realize Rusty has a podcast, or wow, I didn't realize Jeremy's writing for Forbes. And so there are two things that happen. Number one is a bit of a perception shift in the way they're looking at you from operator to thought leader. The second thing is you are leading with a win for them, right? And that's the shift. But it really allows people, number one, to curate stories that they think others need to hear, right? And put a spotlight on people that they think can bring value. There's a lot of fulfillment in that, but it also works toward pragmatic business objectives.
Yeah, no, I love what you said there, because that's what I love about a podcast. It doesn't have to just be a podcast, but like leading with a give. I always like leading with a give. It could be as simple. I tell, people say to me, I say, if you never want to start a podcast, that's cool. If you never want to write a blog, that's cool. If you never want to write a book, that's cool. Even though I think all of them are great things to do, you could just simply post about someone on LinkedIn, right? And you can use LinkedIn or social media to give to people, to profile people, to give shout outs to people. So there's lots of ways to do it in a very simple fashion, like you said. Now, obviously, if you're like, hey, this is my book, there's a lot of authority that goes into that. Obviously, this is called the authority advantage, but like there's a lot of authority in a book. And then, like you said, putting people in the book. Even David Meerman Scott is an example. He's the first thing that I read in your entire book. You know what I mean? And so that's a huge give. I'm sure. I mean, it's great stuff, but it's beneficial to both parties.
Yeah, it definitely is. And you're hitting on something I think there that's really important, which is there are really specific things that elevate your authority in almost an irrational way. One is being the author of a book. Another is it being featured with name brand media, whether it's a Forbes or an HBR or others. And I think part of what I want leaders to think a little bit about. So back to this idea of building trust before you get in the room with somebody. Patty Brennan, we talk about in the book. She's a financial advisor up in the Northeast. She's got one of the largest female-owned financial advisory firms in the whole country. And it's interesting, if you kind of put yourself in the shoes of somebody that's gotten referred to 5 different financial advisors, 4 of the 5 that I Google their name, Jeremy, I'm going to get a suit and tie picture on an Edward Jones website or a Morgan Stanley website or a XYZ financial services website. There's nothing negative about that. It's just that they're the most commoditized thing that could possibly exist. I'm in the position of power. I'm interviewing them about why they're the fit for me. Well, when you Google Patty Brennan's name, you land on her website, Key Financial. The first thing you see on that website is not, a stock photo of a couple of grandparents walking their grandkids down the street, right? Or down the beach, or something else you might normally see. The first thing you see there is Patty Brennan up on stage, and you've got a Forbes logo right behind her. She is mid-speech. Well, what's happened there? Those 4 of the 5, again, I'm in the position of power. When I call Patty's firm, oh, you need me to wait 6 weeks for an appointment? I'm just feeling lucky to get in the room with her. And so again, what's happened there is she immediately goes to doing what she does best, which is giving value, teaching, right? Because I already trust her based on what I've found online, versus the others, again, are in a position where, again, I'm interviewing them. What you see right here is, I think, another important thing right under Patty's video, Jeremy. So these logos, again, part of what I want people to think about with this online brand audit, when I go to your website, when I go to your LinkedIn profile, if you are leading with stock photos, corporate logos like your logo or headshots, great picture. It does nothing to create an image in my mind of somebody that I'm trusting. When I get to Patty's website, I may not know Patty. I get an image in my mind for CNBC and Fortune and Forbes. And so what happens is Patty's image is along for the ride with the image in my mind for those brands. Now, back to the not building a brand focused on ego. What I want your listeners and viewers to be really intentional about is we want to walk a very fine line with your brand. So on one side of the coin, I want the visuals to say what I don't want you to say about yourself, which is top of her category thought leader, main stage speaker. Man, I'm going to be lucky to get in the room with her. And then the flip side, the entirety of your content strategy from the book to the blog to the podcast and beyond is all mission-driven thought leadership. If you never take another step with me, I'm going to leave you better off as a result of having read this. But as you know, Jeremy, I'm not interested in the blog post or the book or the podcast until I recognize you're the guy to teach me on this topic. And that's why we're going to do both sides of that coin.
Yeah, if you're listening to the audio, we are showing her actual website and kind of showing exactly what Rusty's talking about. And you talk about this a lot too, Rusty, not just on the website, but you talk about on LinkedIn, right? Because sometimes when you search someone's name, it's usually within the first 3 search results is the LinkedIn profile. And you talk about this on LinkedIn too.
Yeah, I would guess for 95% of your audience, when they do that online brand audit, Jeremy, the first thing that's going to come up connected to them is that LinkedIn profile. And so again, put yourself in the shoes of somebody that has been referred to you. When they land on that LinkedIn profile, keep in mind, there's no image in their mind yet for you. So in that header image area, if you're giving me the number of people I see that have like a sunset picture off the coast of California.
I was listening to you, one of the videos a couple of days ago, and you said about the sunset, and I went to someone, and I was researching someone, and that's exactly what their main header image in LinkedIn was just a sunset image.
Dude, sunset pictures, generic quotes, corporate logo, like their corporate logo, those things do nothing to build trust with somebody that doesn't yet know you. So instead, what I'd like to see is a visual of you in a setting that connotes authority. So give me an action shot of you on stage, and ideally there's a Forbes logo or HBR. Just pick the event. And if you don't have that yet, cool, right? Let's work toward it. But the big thing there is you want to associate yourself with brands that your audience knows, trusts, and respects. So LinkedIn, as you mentioned, Jeremy, until somebody's got a home-based website, it's kind of what I want them to think of as their home base online, and make sure that profile is both building trust, but also allowing you to get clear on your mission and where you want to make an impact.
I want to, we talked a little bit about Zilker Media, but you had an agency before Zilker that you built up and actually sold. So can you talk about a little bit about towards the end of that journey, or the beginning of the next path, the journey of that agency? What was going on at that time when you were going to sell the company?
Sure. So that was my first business, and started it in 2010, grew it to 2016. We got acquired in 2016 by Advantage Media Group, Forbes Books. So that first agency was called Shelton Interactive. And Jeremy, that was a business entirely focused on book marketing and PR. We launched some of the biggest business books in the world. The One Thing, worked with Tom Rath and Chicken Soup for the Soul, just some of the biggest brands. Ton of great work, just a fantastic team, built great culture there. The challenge with that business was twofold. Number one, I made a lot of rookie mistakes as an entrepreneur and thought I had to wrap myself in the middle of every campaign, and just did some things that really, I think in hindsight, held both my team and the agency back. But number two, the challenge with that business was a book marketing campaign is a transactional thing. You hire a firm, you launch the book, and it's at the end of that relationship, which is usually a 6-month campaign. Rusty, thank you guys so much. Y'all are awesome. I'll call you in 3 years. And so it was a very hard business to grow because you were always just replacing the books that just rolled off. And so we were fortunate to have a strategic buyer that was looking to add a marketing arm, and that's gone really well. It's the rare case, Jeremy, that I'm better friends with the founder of that business that acquired me 7 years later than I was when it happened, which doesn't happen very often. It helps that that's a fellow EO member. He's also in YPO, but just somebody that to this day, again, co-author of the book that released yesterday. So it's worked really well. But what we decided to do with Zilker was, let's take everything that we learned from launching books and let's apply it to businesses, to banks, to law firms, with the understanding that number one, they need this more than ever right now, per the Gallup study I mentioned earlier, because most of them are still leading with the logo. But number two, if it goes well, and we're fortunate that it has really often, that's a forever client. That's a year over year over year client. And so that's really what we're trying to build at Zilker. One of the big things that we've done differently here, we've got a lot of the team back together and just great culture and just, people that I'm fortunate to work with. My partner in the business, our CEO, Paige Velasquez Buddy, is, a much more capable CEO, just miles better than I was in running Shelton Interactive and doing just a fantastic job with the business. And she's, doing a lot of the things that we talk about in the book. She recently had a TEDx talk here in Austin and beyond. So we're having a lot of fun with the new agency. I'm still doing a ton of work with Forbes Books. I love that. I'd get to do a lot of teaching and a lot of coaching there. But back to the Shelton Interactive piece for a second. It was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make in my life, hands down. And, to this day, I still think about on a regular basis, the feeling in my gut as I talked to the team about that. So there were a lot of lessons that I learned through that, but going back, I wouldn't change anything about it.
What are some things, Rusty, that you think about looking back on the selling process for someone who's going to be going through that in the future? What are some things that you learned from the selling process that you wish you would have known?
Yeah, well, one of the big things that I did that I would encourage everybody to do is I really kicked the tires on Adam and on the business. So I talked to a lot of people that I knew had connections or done business with him in the past, and spent a lot of time really vetting that out. The other thing that I did early on that I think was really valuable that I would encourage people to think about is kind of have a list in your mind of deal breakers. In other words, and not just financial. In other words, what are the things that, hey, I don't want to waste your time and let's not go any further unless these 5 things work for you. And I did that early on with Adam. And I think it was really helpful for both of us to get on the same page with, hey, let's not go any further unless we're pretty close on these. So those are 2 big things. The thing that I wish I had done better is really think through kind of the emotional side of it and the identity side of it. I mean, those of us in EO, YPO, WPO, our identities in large part are really wrapped up or can get really wrapped up in our position as an entrepreneur with the business. And so I didn't think as much on what that would actually feel like after. And again, that's with a really awesome acquirer. That's not with somebody that did anything wrong. It's just, it's the emotional side of that for most entrepreneurs that have been through it is really something that takes a toll. And so I wish I'd have been more prepared for that. If
you're comfortable sharing, Rusty, what's an example of some of the deal breakers that you had?
Yeah. So one of the deal breakers was I wasn't interested in getting acquired if the plan was to lay off any staff, or if the plan was to make anybody move out of Austin, Texas, where we were based. So those were 2 really key ones for me because, we had a great thing going. That's obviously why they were interested in acquiring us. And so I didn't want to disrupt where we were with that team. I had kind of a general idea in my mind financially of what was going to be something that I would entertain. And so I threw that in there as well. Those were really the main things. And also trying to get a sense, Jeremy, just vision, right? Can we go 1 + 1 = 3 with this acquisition? And, again, fortunately, looking back 7 years later, it's been that and much more as we've continued to grow Forbes Books. But those were some of the key things just at the start, just to make sure, hey, there's a ton of time in the due diligence process. There's a lot of emotional energy that goes into, getting excited. Is this going to happen? There are ups and downs throughout the process. So I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page early.
What did you find, Rusty? You don't have to share specific numbers, but you were probably seeing what's valuation look like for a company, for an agency at that point? What did you find the range of EBITDA that it probably depends on obviously what revenue level they're at, but what did you find the ranges of EBITDA were at for multiples of EBITDA for selling a company at that point?
Man, it was all over the place. So some people you talk to, they would base it on EBITDA. So it would be, between 2 and 5 times EBITDA. Other people within the service business, it's more of a, hey, let's look at, 0.7 to 1.3 times revenue. Was something I was getting from a lot of people as well. And so I think so much of it, Jeremy, depends on who's got the interest, right? Is the person trying to sell their business, or is somebody trying to buy the business? And how strategic is the buy? How, what kind of technology assets are coming along with it? So I think there's, in the service business, as I know you well know, it's a wild west in terms of figuring out what it can be.
Yeah. Talk about the one thing and some of the things you did with them.
Oh man. So this is one of my favorite books that we have ever worked on through the years. So it's written by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Gary's, co-founder of Keller Williams Realty. Jay's been helping them build their thought leadership over there and has a great real estate business of his own. Also, I've actually got your viewers can see this over here. The central question in that book is on our whiteboard here. So the central question in that book, what's the one thing so that by doing it, everything else is either easier or unnecessary? In other words, what's the high leverage play? What's the thing you can do that sends more dominoes falling in your way than anything else? So it was interesting. That was the first book that Keller Williams had put out that was really outside of their core real estate space. So they've been doing real estate related books for a while. Gary's first book was a book called The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. And since I've heard Gary talk a little bit about what that first book did for them, that was back at a time where Keller Williams, some people may remember, was really chasing Coldwell Banker. They were chasing Century 21 from a corporate brand to corporate brand perspective. They're pretty far behind. And so what Gary talks about is, he would walk in the door at a Coldwell Banker office or a Century 21 office, and his books sitting on the desks of their agents, right? Not because they're perceiving him as somebody that's trying to recruit them, right? They're leaning in to learn from him. And again, I don't know, there's a better case.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, that's the whole point of creating an authority advantage is people lean in to learn from you versus you having to fight through skepticism as you sell them something.
There's also a Gordon Ramsay story.
So I'm a big Vegas guy. I love going to Las Vegas, Jeremy. So I had to put, a Vegas related branding lesson in the book. So we talk a lot about Gordon Ramsay, and many people I'm sure are familiar with Gordon Ramsay, one of the most successful chefs in the world, TV, books, et cetera. So he's got to deal with Caesars Entertainment, where they operate Gordon Ramsay branded restaurants in many of their properties around the world, including a lot of them in Vegas. So the contract per Vital Vegas in Las Vegas requires Ramsay to be on site for at least 24 hours, one time each year. And so, in other words, he's not behind the counter cooking dinner, right? He's more valuable to them, not as an operator doing the work, but as somebody who creates a brand that people want to associate with through his books, through TV, et cetera. The other big lesson from Gordon Ramsay that I hope a lot of your audience will really think about, for a lot of people, when we encourage them to sort of go down this road of building thought leadership, the initial thought is, hey, I got to play this formal role of what I think a thought leader should talk like or what they should act like. And if you watch Gordon Ramsay, I mean, there's only one Gordon Ramsay in the world, right? He leans into his personality. And by the way, that certainly recoils some people, but it's the reason for his success. And so in the age of chat GPT and all of the different content, I mean, there are a lot of different podcasts I can listen to. There's a lot of different books I can read. The only reason I'm following you versus somebody else is because you're authentic to me. You bring your personality. There's something different. And so I know you guys encourage that for your Rise clients as well, but be more of yourself if you want to attract and build an audience.
It takes time, I think, even for myself, doing thousands of these, it still takes time, and I'm still figuring it out and still leaning into it, because sometimes it's tough to do that. And just, yeah, I just find it's difficult, because you're more vulnerable in a sense when you put yourself out there in the real self out there. One of the topics I want to talk about, I just want to mention too, that I know you speak to a lot of groups. You speak to EO, you speak to YPO. So if you are an EO member listening, you can contact Rusty directly. He does speak to EO groups. What kind of talks do you give to groups?
I love doing learning events for EO and YPO groups. And so I'll come in and do, typically a 60-minute keynote on the authority advantage. So how to build thought leadership focused on impact, not ego. And then right after the talk, Jeremy, what we like to do is one-on-one quick brand audit. So we'll set up a couple of tables and do individual brand audits for attendees that don't really understand, okay, do I need to change my name? How does my LinkedIn profile look? So it's a nice, really pragmatic, hey, here's how it works, but let's actually give you a plan that you can put into practice tomorrow.
One thing that I thought was interesting with Zilker Media is you brought on a CEO. Okay. So at what point did you decide I'm going to bring on a CEO for this business?
Yeah. So Paige Velasquez Buddy, who is the CEO, was with us back at Shelton Interactive and has been with us really from the start here at Zilker. Initially, I wasn't, that wasn't necessarily a definite thing. So I had it in the back of my mind that it was going to be a possibility, but she was somebody that I knew had the potential to be a fantastic leader, had always kind of naturally been that way, and made the decision that, for Zilker to do what we need it to do, it's going to need somebody that can give their entire attention here. I was still, foot in and still am doing a lot of work with Forbes Books and a lot of work with Zilker. And so it was a transition where we spent some time internally with her really riding shotgun with me for a while. I was teaching her everything just in terms of the way that I thought about different things and wanted her to bring, her own perspective to the table. But it's been one of those things that's allowed me, Jeremy, to focus on best and highest use of my time, the stuff I do really well. I know, I'm not a great one-on-one manager. I'm not a great, there's some operational things that there are plenty of people that are much better at that than I am. And so what I've been really proud of with Paige is that she's done a really fantastic job of growing the business, but also has done a really good job of building thought leadership for herself. I mentioned, TEDx, she speaks at quite a few WPO and other events. And so she and I actually team up for a lot of these presentations, and it's been a lot of fun. Glad to have her as a partner in the business.
Rusty, I have one last question. I know we have a minute or so, but before I ask you, I want to point people to zilkermedia.com. What other places do we want to point people towards to check out to learn more?
For sure. So zilkermedia.com is a great place to learn more about the agency. rustyshelton.com is a great place if you're looking to learn more about how I can come in and give a talk or a workshop or a learning event. And then the authorityadvantagebook.com is the home base for our new book. And you can, get a free digital download actually of the book there. You can access Authority IQ assessment. There's a lot of great stuff there. And if you're thinking about writing a book or you want to learn a little bit more about writing a book yourself, that's a great place to start.
So rapid fire for 30 seconds. I want to know your favorite books, right? I mean, as you saw, I had 6 credits available in Audible. I just bought the Authority Advantage, so now I have 5. But rapid fire, some of your favorite books that people should check out. Obviously, we mentioned The One Thing. What are some others?
Yeah, the One Thing's always at the top of my list in terms of recommendations for people. I'm a huge fan of Tony Robbins. So I love a lot of the stuff that he's put out. I Think and Grow Rich is always one that I encourage. I'm sure that's something that you've gone through before. Those are some of the big ones for me. Gary Vaynerchuk has been somebody that I've looked to a ton of his stuff through the years, and I think does things really the right way. So those would be people that I would really encourage, listeners to look at. Awesome. If they haven't already.
Check it out. That and many more. Check out other episodes of the podcast. And Rusty, thank you so much.
Jeremy, thanks for having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a find the same. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.